podcast with Stay Bizze Media. Today we have the privilege to be talking to Mike Crispino, American sportscaster, currently based in Hartford, Connecticut. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
No problem.
Appreciate it. So before we get into any crazy detail, I just want to tell you a little bit about the man I'm sitting next to. Very established sportscaster, radio play-by-play, MSG, New York Knicks, U.S. Open, New York Yankees. Really, really talented, titan in the business. It's truly a pleasure to be here with him today. We're going to tell a little bit of his story, how he came from high school athlete, college athlete to being a sportscaster, and hope you enjoy. First, off the rip, never studied communications in college, nothing broadcasted related. How did we end up here?
I just basically tried to follow what I loved, which was always sports. Played it as a kid, played it through high school, got injured in college, couldn't play it anymore, so I had to pursue something. You have to make a living at some point, so I started doing all kinds of things in the education field, then in the retail field. And while I was in retail, just out of college, I realized that I just wasn't happy. I just wasn't doing something that I was passionate about. A lot of people come out of school and they try to make a living. That's what you're trying to do. You try to make money, try to have a house, whatever you're trying to do. And in that period of time, just out of college, I was in a transition where I was trying to figure out, how I was going to do that. I didn't see broadcast as the way to go. I didn't see communications as the way to go, but I did have some interests. I liked music too, music and sports. So where I was living in the Hartford area originally, I got involved with the University of Hartford's radio station doing a music show. And a lot of the folks on the radio station had communication skills and they were in broadcast. So I got to enjoy being around them. And I started realizing it was more fun to be around people in broadcast than it was to be around people in retail. So I started, being a fun seeker like I am. I kind of moved over in that area a lot more, as much as I could. So I was working 2-3 jobs, a regular job during the day, retail, and then going to do radio shows at night, mostly music, and then ultimately got hired to do a music show commercially in the area. It was a big band station, and we had a program director who operated the station. He was also one of the CEOs of the station. It was a small place, and he was a huge sports guy, and he said, why don't you do sports commentary every day? We'll use it in the morning show, like a 60-second commentary. So I said, okay, I'll try it. And we started doing that, and I kind of enjoyed that. It was talking about the events of the day, whatever it was, whether it was UConn or the New York teams or the Boston teams. So I started to realize that was a creative outlet, which I think a lot of people want in their lives, right? They want to be able to say something about what's going on in the world and have a little input, a little impact maybe. So that's what got me going in that area. And from there, it's a long story.
Absolutely.
You got to get a little lucky. You got to be you got to persevere though. You got to be willing to put your time in, to do what it takes, to take any job, to work any hours. I got to use the term after a while early on, listen, sleep's overrated. You can sleep when you're dead, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because if you want to do something, if you want to achieve something, time is meaningless. Whatever it takes. Absolutely. And that's what you do. So that's what I did.
Were there any specific roadblocks that you ran into, getting that first position?
No, you know what? It's networking. Now today, networking is all about LinkedIn and all these websites. It wasn't like that then. It was somebody who I knew at the University of Hartford, went to be a program director at WRCQ, RCQ, right? A few miles from here. And we knew each other. We liked each other's work. When he got that job, he asked me if I wanted to come over there. And so again, networking. I ended up from there, ended up in New Hampshire, the public radio of New Hampshire, startup. Never been done before. But a friend of mine went up and worked for a rock and roll station. University of Hartford guy. He had a first professional job with the rock and roll station, GIR, I think it was. It was a good rock and roll station up in Concord and Manchester area. So he said, they're starting this station. And I think he was a little bored up there. He wanted me to come up and spend some time. Like, you're my friend, come on up here. I had to leave. But I had a pretty good thing going. In retail, I was making very good money at the time. And I was still doing my little radio shows and getting my kicks doing that. But he convinced me that you should come up here and start this radio station with these people. I had no idea that I could do that or whether I wanted to, but I went up and took an interview there, and never forget it, the place was a shambles. There was nothing in the place, and they were going to go on the air in maybe 3 months. Engineers carrying wires around. We had no records because we were playing LPs at the time. Nothing. And the general manager, who had been hired to start this thing, he was sitting in an office with nothing, no desk, just a chair and some boxes. And he goes, well, listen, here's the job. You want to work at night, we're going to do jazz shows every night, you're going to do that. And then he said, but the second part of your job is you're going to be our promotions director. And I said, promotions director, okay, what does that mean? And he goes, you're going to get the word out about our radio station and whatever that takes. Well, what it took was getting in the car every day at about 2 in the afternoon and driving around the state of New Hampshire with a handful of pamphlets, program guides, bringing them to coffee shops, prep schools, universities, grocery stores, meeting people, putting down the program guide, telling people to listen to us. We're coming on the air in another month. So that was what I did for a year. It was an education, I got to say.
Yeah, so there's so much power in that, getting in the car every day, driving around the state of New Hampshire, handing out these pamphlets, not even necessarily knowing if it's going to fall into someone's hands or someone's hands that is actually going to turn the radio on and listen to the program. I mean, just that blind faith and just being driven by your passion to work in radio is very powerful. How did you end up from New Hampshire getting to Boston? How did that transition go?
Well, I was in New Hampshire for a year. It was a really bad winter. It was a personal decision. It was snowing so much there. I said, I don't know if I can make it another year here. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine had been working at CPTV here in Hartford. His girlfriend got a job at ESPN when they started, in the late 70s.
Yep.
And I called him and I said, Roger, I don't know if I can make it another year in New Hampshire. What's Kate doing at ESPN? And he said, well, call her. And so I called her. She said, send me a tape. I said, a tape of what? She goes, a tape of you talking about sports. I said, okay, how am I going to do that? She said, go across the street, there's a cable television place in Concord. So I went across the street, asked him, could you record me talking about 3 minutes of sports, whatever it may be. They said, okay. So they did that. I sent it to her. Now, this was the very beginning of ESPN. They had just started putting games on the air, and they had just hired Chris Berman, Bob Lee, Tom Mees, a few other guys, or maybe 5 people in the office. The office about as big as this little stage we're on. Anyway, her boss was in charge of the studio programming, and his name was Bill Fitz, and he said, listen, we're going to probably hire a couple guys to do updates because we got to have some presence during the program day when we're doing all these, they were airing UConn games and other stuff. And so, okay, I'll try that. So I came down here, no experience, never been on television.
What was that like?
That was scary. I gotta tell you.
No experience, never been in front of a camera.
It was like a car crash a lot for me. Because I had no idea what I was doing. Now the other guys had jobs before. I think Bob Lee had worked in New Jersey. I think Berman had worked in Providence a little bit. Yeah, everybody had a little bit of experience. So they were ahead of the game, right? Greg Gumbel, he'd been working in New York.
Yep.
He came up here. George Grant had been at TNH in New Haven. Experienced guys, they've been on the air 2, 3, 4 years maybe. I had been on the air no minutes. So, and we had no prompter. So I was having to create a style for this new, thing they were trying. So anyway, I got 6 months out of it. I knew I was, like I said, I was crashing and burning every day. But it was a startup scenario, so I got 6 months out of it, and I was able to get a tape from there, and I brought it to the NBC affiliate here in Hartford. And fortunately, they were looking for some local presence. Now, I had been a local person who grew up here, and I had an ESPN resume of sorts, not much, and so their news director said, listen, well, we need a person like you, we're gonna put you on the weekend. I said, okay. So I started doing weekend sportscasts, and that's when I started to get it. I started to understand what to do. I learned everything, editing videotape, and I didn't shoot stuff. We didn't do that then. We had cameramen, but I had to edit stuff pretty much every day, every night, so it was helpful. Learned a lot. Tremendous education. A couple year or so of that, and the regular anchor, sports anchor, leaves to go to Boston, to a bigger market, and so they elevate me. They put me in as sports director. So I get a little publicity. We do well. I'm there for maybe 4 years, and the Whalers were big in town at the time, so that was interesting. UConn was just starting to become a story here. It had been a sleepy university, but then in the 80s, late 80s, Jim Calhoun started to get it going with basketball, and so it got interesting, got exciting. And then I got a call from Boston. Again, happenstance. It's just dumb luck sometimes. They had hired a station in Boston run by Gannett, part of Boston Globe at the time, Channel 56. They had the 10 o'clock news, and the guy they had hired had come from one of the local network affiliates, but he was having his problems, whatever they were, personal issues, and I just got a call out of the blue. I had sent a tape up there 6 months before that, forgotten about it. Got a call from their news director, can you come up here and talk to us? So I'm thinking to myself, this could be interesting. Now Boston, at the time, late 80s, early 90s, that was at the highest level, still is as a sports market. Yeah, so now I'm coming from, I think Hartford at the time was 25th, 6th or something, size-wise, so it was a big jump. But I go up there, and there's a table of people waiting to interview me. I don't know what the questions are going to be. I have no idea what they're looking for. They started quizzing me on Boston sports. So I knew right away, okay, this is what it is. They're going to find out if I know anything about Boston sports. Now, fortunately, being a fan, I follow everything that's going on in New York, Boston, because they're our closest major cities. So I was able to answer the right questions, and they hired me as their sports anchor and a sports director. And the cherry on top of it was that we had the Celtics on our air. We did all the road games. We did 41 road games. And the play-by-play man at the time, Gil Santos, was a legend, was working at BZ Radio. And the Gannett people said, well, we want our guy to do the games. So again, I fall into that. And I'm scared to death of that, because I really haven't, I did some play-by-play for Nesson and a couple little events here and there. Now I'm doing the Celtics. I mean, Red Auerbach's watching my games. He never got too angry with me, which I was very appreciative of, because I was scared of him. Yeah. Red Auerbach was a legend. He was a giant in the game, obviously, but a decent man. Everyone feared Red because Red would get angry about stuff, but deep down he was a great guy. But anyway, he didn't give me a hard time. Did a couple years there. We lost the rights to the Celtics, which ended my run, unfortunately. And actually, interestingly enough, ironically, Patrick Ewing and the Knicks were just getting good in the early 90s. I think it was 89, 90. They eliminated the Celtics from the playoffs. I was going to do another playoff game or two if the Celtics pushed it to 7, but they didn't. Knicks came to Boston and beat them, which was a real letdown because, Larry Bird, Parrish, McHale, Dennis Johnson, they're all still there. They'd won 3 championships, but they were on the downhill a little bit. So they lost to the Knicks, and I end up going to work in New York. And the next thing I know, I'm in the studio talking about Patrick Ewing making runs at championships in New York after he ended my Boston career. So it was ironic.
Yeah. Now, could you kind of talk a little bit about, you're new to sportscasting, you're covering the Celtics. What was it like trying to bridge relationships with players? Was there any of that in the locker room at all, or was it just strictly?
Oh no, we traveled. Well, we didn't travel with teams by charter, which we do now. That's kind of standard operating procedure. We went commercial. So if you can imagine this, going to Logan for a road trip, walking through the airport with the terminal with Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Danny Ainge. We're walking through there, we're walking along with him, our producer, Bob Cousy was the analyst. Yep. We're walking with our little bags and we're walking through the terminal. Now that doesn't happen these days, right? So people obviously flocked to those guys. They were heroes in Boston. So it was a funny dynamic going on. So it kind of helped, though, break down some ice, any ice that would have been between myself and the players, because we were all in it together a little bit, Okay, we're all sitting in the terminal waiting for the flight. So you end up talking to guys, because we're killing time here. And they kind of want you around to insulate them from the fan, attention they're getting. So all that being said, that helped. But it was still intimidating. I mean, come on, Larry Bird, 3 championships, Parrish. I love those guys. I loved watching them. I covered them as a Hartford sports anchor during their championship years, '86 when they won, '84, like that. So I was looking up to these guys, and all of a sudden I'm working with them. That's what I think when I learned to be, just be a human being, just talk to people like people, and they kind of respond to that because they're used to having people suck up to them, right? Oh, you're the greatest thing ever. Please sign this. Yeah, that's not what I did. I was just being a person, getting to know somebody. And most of the guys were pretty good about that. Parrish was very funny, quiet guy, but very funny. Bird was a prankster. He would give you little jabs. McHale would be laughing in the background when Larry Bird was giving you a hard time, which they did because that's kind of part of relieving the pressure of what they were doing.
Absolutely. Would you say basketball is your favorite sport to cover, or?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but you got a 24-second clock, you got a 30-second clock. Something's happening every half a minute. Someone's scoring, or they're not scoring, or getting a shot blocked, or running a fast break. So it's on the fly. I do like that about it. You almost feel like you're playing the game. In football, it's more of a setup. We got to set up the down and yardage, the time, the score, the positioning of the players. There's a lot of setup to the actual plays. A little more strategy involved in that. And baseball is my favorite sport. And I got to do that with the Yankees some, and the Mets when we had the Mets on our air at MSG, Fox, and now with UConn baseball. So it's a different game, as you know. I mean, baseball is a strategic mind game going on between pitcher, hitter, manager, coach, infielder, outfielder. There's a lot of little things, subtle stuff going on, and that's what I like about baseball.
Absolutely. Would you say there's more space in the baseball coverage to kind of add anecdotal or more analytical?
Oh, yeah.
And kind of let your mind really show?
Well, I think you can express a lot of what your experience is in life in baseball or any sport when you're doing baseball, because you got 3 hours generally. You got 9 innings. You got a lot of downtime. I know they're trying to shorten the games up, and as they should, but there is so much time to talk about individuals who are playing, coaches who might have talked to you about something, cities you're in, all kinds of things. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the challenge of it, and it's also the rewarding part of it, because you can express so much of what you know and what you've experienced to the audience to make their experience listening to the game or watching the game a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Now, you transitioned from covering the Celtics, like you had mentioned earlier, going to the Knicks with Ewing. New York's obviously the biggest market in the world, so I mean that's another jump going from Boston to New York. Any more challenges when you got to New York? The way things kind of ran in that city, or
they have so many other things going on in their lives. There's 15 million people driving around. That's what I liked about doing radio in New York. I always felt like the cabbies and the folks who were driving around were always listening to us because they're in their cars all the time. You're in your car all the time in New York. So yeah, it was bigger, but that made it go faster in a way. You didn't have time to sit there and think about, oh, I'm doing a Ranger game, because I would go over and do play-by-play in hockey maybe 10, 15 times a year. Or I'd do the Mets, like middle inning play-by-play and hosting. So it was all different. I was doing hockey teams, basketball teams, covering the Giants on Wednesdays. We had a Jets weekly show. I would host that sometimes. So you had to jump back and forth between all these teams. So you had to be, there was never a dull moment. You had 9 professional teams. The colleges were afterthoughts. Rutgers, afterthought. St. John's. I ended up doing St. John's on radio for 5 years, and they had just been really good. They had gotten to the NCAA tournament late 90s, and did coaches shows with Lou Carnesecca, Norm Roberts, those guys. So you never had a chance to breathe. You're like, you don't have time to think about what do I have to do tomorrow? No, what's the thing I have to get ready to do, and get ready to do it, because this is the biggest market in the world. You can't fake it.
No.
You can't go in there and give it a side angle, fake job and get away with it, because people pay attention.
No, that must have been stressful, to say the least.
It was. But It is stressful, but I think if you're going to be in this business, you have to be willing, or you have to be able to not let stress get in the way.
Gotcha.
No, it does get in the way sometimes. I mean, things happen. I remember a couple of years we opened up Yankees, and Al Trotwood was our host mainly, but he was doing the Knicks in the playoffs. So I went on Yankee road trips to start the season. Now we're in Cleveland, Chicago in April 1st. I want to tell you, it was snowing in Cleveland. Chicago was under 30 degrees, so we're outside doing these pregame shows, and they were not short. They were half hour or longer. And that was a challenge because the weather conditions were such that they got in the way of everything. But you couldn't worry about that. You had a half hour. Don't make a fool of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Make it interesting, informative, entertaining. That was the job. So there's something about that performance thing. If you're not up to the performance thing, and you know this, you're an athlete, you played. If you can calm down during a performance, everything's fine.
Absolutely.
But if you can't do that, your performance is going to be affected. So I could not let my performance be affected by nervousness or distraction or anything else. So I think it helped me. It helped me to really focus and concentrate on what I had to do.
Were there any routines or kind of mantras that you would do before every time you got on the air or anything like that? You know?
Well, you prepare, if you're hosting a show, pregame Yankees, let's say, or Knicks, whatever it may be, you have to make notes to yourself to remember what the sequence of events is, right? What are we going to talk about first? And what are we talk about second? Or who are we going to talk about? The Indians, we're playing them. So you have notes to yourself. You know what's funny? I never rehearsed that stuff. It's crazy. We had a producer, Leon Schweier, a guy I went to high school with. He's Catholic. He actually helped me get the job at MSG. He's talking about networking.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
He's still in the business. He worked at Big Ten Network. He worked at Pac-12 Network. He hired me there as well. I got to do work in those networks and those conferences. Now he's at the NFL Network. But I never forget this. We're in Cleveland, and like one of those cold days. And I remember they were driving cars around the field because it was opening day. And I'm looking at the people in the cars. They're all bundled up. The guy with hats, and wool hats, and scarves. And I said to Lee, Lee, are we going to rehearse? Because this is it was blustery, windy. Cameraman was like freezing, trying to hold the shot, all those things. He goes, rehearsal, rehearsal. We don't need that. And I'm like, okay, then we don't need that. And then so sometimes you're forced into like performing, and I've been able to do that. I mean, I don't know how, I don't know why. Just it's an ability to concentrate regardless of the exterior distractions.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're in the first month of 2020, new decade. I mean, you've been in the business for a very long time. You've gone from the ground up. You've radio, broadcasting games. How do you see the industry changing in regards to, it was different to come into the industry at your age, and now with digital media and all these phones and technology, I'm sure if a young person wants to start off getting into broadcasting these days, it's going to be a lot different. How have you seen the industry kind of change in that sense?
Well, there's a million ways to see video and highlights of games. The emphasis is still on live broadcasts. If you look at the ratings, the most highly rated programs annually are sports events or maybe the Oscars. That's it. Every other program, the ratings are down, they're deflated. But something about sports, and I've always said this, you don't know what's going to happen. When the game starts, you might see something you've never seen before, and you probably will. And that's why people tune in. I don't care if you're talking about a Knicks team that lost 65 games. They might somehow beat somebody on a tip basket at the buzzer that day. Now I'm doing UConn. They're struggling, right? They've lost 6 games in overtime or by 2 points or something like that. It's a bizarre season for them. But I still feel like when I go to work the next day, they're playing Temple, or the next day they're playing at Memphis, something could happen I've never seen before. And that's what drives me. So you always have that feeling that there's a newness to it. But there's also the way sports is consumed now is different, because people don't watch everything, but they can go on their phones and pick up all the highlights. Now, I don't prefer to do that, but I'll do it to catch up on some things. It's unfortunate to some degree because people don't really watch entire events. They watch pieces and bits and fragments. And I think that takes away from what a broadcast is. A broadcast is a living, breathing entity. It's a 2-hour window of stuff. All kinds of things could happen. So I think it's just consumed differently now, pretty much. The way people consume it is, let me see what happened to the Celtics last night. Let me see what happened in that football bowl game or something like that. But I don't really want to watch it, but I want to know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So they consume things way differently.
What keeps you going?
I got to do something.
Yeah.
I want to do something. No, it keeps you. I think doing this or anything you're doing, it keeps you involved in what's going on in the community, in what's going on in life, right? Even though it's only sports for me, I still follow what goes on in news. It's what motivates. It's what inspires you to get up in the morning, go do things, because you just, like I said, you just don't know what might happen. You just don't know. So it's that intrigue that drives me.
I mean, you've kind of mentioned it a few times, dumb luck, or kind of just right place, right time. I'm a firm believer that we kind of create our own luck, and opportunities present themselves to us, before we even think we're ready, and there's a lot of power in taking advantage of those opportunities. And even if you are afraid or there's a little bit of fear involved, reach your neck out, put your foot forward, and kind of jump into that environment, because you never know what's going to come out of it. For the young people at home, they're going to come across this video. The young people who love sports like you do, who are passionate about talking about the game, and not only broadcasting the game, but analyzing what's going on play by play. Just one line to them, the kid who's in his college dorm room, who's a finance major, but is passionate about sports and just needs that little push to take it kind of and run with it. What do you have to say for those kids?
I would say don't be afraid to fail, because you're going to fail. I mean, you're going to get fired. It's not always your fault. Sometimes it's circumstance. Sometimes it's because the place you're at is making a change in the way they operate. Mm-hmm. I've been fired a number of times, and most people in this business will say that. It's not fun. It hurts. You've got to change, what you do. You've got to go back into the fight. And many of the people that I was started out in this business with, had jobs with early on, got fired or let go for whatever reason, and they didn't come back to it. They went other places. And I understand that. I mean, you got to make a living. You have families. I've been lucky, like I said, I've been lucky to make a good living at this for all these years. Maybe because I still believe that I had something to offer. I believe I had some talent. But you can't be afraid to get beat. And you know this, any athlete knows this. You get beat, it's how you come back from that. Like UConn right now, they've had 6 losses, like I said, against ranked teams by 2 or 3 points. Either you go, we're not good enough, we're losers, or you say, tomorrow's the day. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow's the day. And I've been saying that my whole career. Now, I don't know what will happen from here on. I may never get back to some network level on any event. I might not. But I've had a lot of great experiences, and I'm never going to give them back. I'm never going to forget them. So I would just say, don't be afraid to fail, and don't give up. I mean, once you give up, you're not going to be happy. You got to pursue it, and keep pursuing it, and believe in it, even when there's no reason to believe. And believe me, I've been there many times. No reason to believe you're going to do that. You just keep on plugging, you keep on digging, you keep on networking, you keep on talking to people, and ultimately, at least you're happy that you're in the struggle, you're in the fight, and you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. But when you win it, whatever it may be, you just feel much better.
Absolutely.
Seb, good seeing you.
And joining us. I appreciate all the stories, all the insight. It was very valuable. Thank you so much. And for everybody tuning in on YouTube and online, thank you for joining us on Stay Bizze Media. Stay tuned for some more episodes.